The LoadCall Settlements module streamlines the process of creating and managing payouts for your drivers for the tickets that they've completed. So within Settlements, we have quite a few different tabs right here. We have Settlements, Directory Data, Withholdings, Fuel Cards, and Additionally Due. We'll cover each of these in different videos, so you can go ahead and find those for the tab that you're questioning about. But here in Settlements, right now, I don't have any settlements created, but I do have the ability to create settlements and the ability to change the default settlement settings. So we're going to start off with that. So by clicking on this blue default settlement settings button, it'll open up a window where we can change the default way that we do payouts for our drivers. And these can be overridden for a driver by driver basis, for regions, for things like that. So we'll go over that a little bit later. But the first thing I want to show right here is that LoadCall supports the ability to do a straight percent charge of payout with fuel surcharge pass through, or you cannot pass through the fuel surcharge, or you can do a percent including a percent of the fuel surcharge, or, which all three of these are kind of just quick ways to say drivers get this percent, drivers get that percent, or whatever. And then the last option right here is the settlement rate sheet option, which requires configuration in accounting management, which was covered in a different video with accounting management. So this allows for very granular ways to calculate, each line item completely differently. But in this example, I'm going to do the straight percent of charges, 100% of fuel surcharge pass through, with a percent payout of 85%. So in here you put in the decimal 0.85. The other thing in here is that fuel cards I have set to do a 0% additional fee for fuel card usage, but you could go ahead and charge them for their fuel card usage in here. The other settings in here are the ability to set some default email information in here and choose what report you want to use when you send emails out to these drivers. So some other options in there. But next, we're going to go ahead and kind of cover how we can override these default settlement settings for individual drivers or other carrier groups or things like that. All right, now that we've gone over how to set up the default settlement settings, we're going to see how we can override those in specific cases, as well as some of the other features in here. To do it, we're going to go over into the Directory Data tab. And in here, we have search bars for carriers, drivers, trucks, and trailers. And if we click on this blue Settlement Quick Config button at the top, it'll take us to a page where we can kind of quickly view all of the different carriers or drivers or trucks and trailers and see any of the them that already have these overridden settings on here with the ability to edit them in here. So we can change settlement settings and deal with recurring withholdings, which we'll talk about in the video about recurrings. But you can see in here that we don't have any of these individuals with overridden settings. So let's say if we go back and look, we set up our default settlement setting to be an 85% payout. And let's say that for the purpose of the example, that Colton MacArthur is a lead driver and he has negotiated or you worked with him to do a higher rate. So we can come into the driver settlement settings right here, and we can say that we want to override the settlement payouts for them. So if we click yes, we're going to use the same method of calculation, but instead of 85%, we are going to do a 90%. So let's go ahead and click save. And you'll see in here that the default payout up here is 85%, and they are actually getting a 90% payout. So as this driver's invoices are kind of totaled up and we figure out how much is theirs versus the company's cut, then you can see that it'll calculate out differently. And you can do this for drivers. You could also do it at a carrier level. So for example, you have, a couple drivers that are working for A&D Transport. So if you came into here, you could change A&D Transport and all of the drivers underneath that carrier would have the override done for them. So kind of the priority here is the driver. If there's a driver specific percent or way of calculating out your settlements, that will take priority, then the carriers, then the overall will be last. So some other things in this page, you'll notice that there is the ability to, under trucks and trailers, there's going to be some truck settlement settings. So these are used when figuring out how to do withholdings or reimbursements, which we'll talk about in those videos. But you'll notice that in here we have the ability to fill out these forms, put in fees and other things that may be withheld against a driver. So a pretty useful page, kind of just to scroll through and see all of your different drivers and which ones have overrides or not, and which trucks and trailers are leased out using company plates, things like that. You can also access those settings right here. So if I were to come in and search and using this page, we could, if we know who we're looking for exactly, we can use the search, click on that, we pull them up. We have the ability to edit the driver, so you can pull up and change any of their information in there. The settlement settings in here, which we just changed to be the 90%, and then the recurring withholdings that we'll talk about in the withholdings video. So pretty easy to go in and deal with any off cases. If you have supervisory people who have a higher percentage or different ways of calculating for different regions, your payouts to different drivers, then you can do that. Also with the ability to use the settlement rate sheets for any sort of customizable scenario that you can think of. So pretty flexible with some quick presets, as well as a much more sophisticated manner of doing it with the ability to override in any use case by a driver, carrier, region basis. So yeah, that is the options to set up your initial settlement payout percent calculations.